billionaires informing you that you have to vote for an old, corrupt person you hate to stop the hopeful young guy from winning. I mean, it's not going to work, I don't think.
All right, welcome back to the Moynihan Report. I'm your host, Michael Moynihan. Why are you yelling at me, by the way? You guys are yelling at me over there. I don't like this. Anyway, we're back again, and boy, do we have a good one. Well, I hope it's a good one. We have a good guest. We see how he performs. But Ben Smith has a resume that's super annoying. It's not even in the prompter, because I was like, I don't know what to pick. You know, way back in the day, the Forward, the New York Sun editor of Buzzfeed News, New York Times media columnist, and now the founder and editor-in-chief at Semafor. Ben, welcome. Why do I feel less impressive next to you?
I don't know, because like you, I can't hold a job.
Yes. Yeah, this is the last episode of the show. They're moving the furniture outside into a moving van. Lot to talk about. You're a media guy. You're also a New York politics guy. That's what people don't realize about you. You're fun to talk to about New York politics. So we have some Zoran stuff to discuss. But right now, what's obsessing me, this show, and a lot of other people is a guy who died in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein. Give me a general sense of what you think about the media coverage. I have some opinions. I'm sure that you do too.
Yeah, I have really strong opinions here. I mean, I think it's been disgraceful, basically.
Really?
I think that,
okay.
I think it's basically Pizzagate for people who've been to college, as well as others. But, there was Julia K. Brown did this incredible revelations
Miami Herald,
of his disgusting predation on young women in Florida in the early aughts, and then a kind of cover up, or sort of how that was swept under the carpet and he wasn't really held accountable for it. And that is all true. Yeah. And then every journalist, every law enforcement agency in the world investigated for 10 years and did not find blackmail, did not find sex trafficking, did not find, books, and did not find videotapes, did not find that he was an agent for Mossad, and all this stuff, half of which, by the way, is nonsense rumors that he himself started.
Yeah, like the intelligence one in particular. Right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? He talked to everybody, and he was obviously talking to all these people. But I just think there's the scale of a cover-up that would have gotten both the Biden Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, and by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's sitting in jail and presumably, if she had something to give the authorities, would have. Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just, and so it's pretty frustrating, I think, to watch because it is both sort of politically convenient, both for the right and the left right now, to pretend that there is a there, for there to be this consensus that we have to pretend there's something happening there. Yeah,
I mean, watching this sort of thing, one of the things that you can't really say, I mean, I've said it a few times and gotten some angry emails about it, but if you, in this universe, if you, as a journalist, you realize how this stuff is nonsense. If you understand how this stuff works, if you've hung around with rich people, I am not a rich person, but I try to get close to them for journalistic reasons sometimes, and then you realize, oh, how did all these people end up on Jeffrey Epstein's island? You raise your hand and say, well, he has an island. Yeah. And it's pretty easy. In a plane. And by the way, you know who's going to be there? Chris Tucker and Bill Clinton and Noam Chomsky, by the way. This kind of unravels the conspiracy theory, by the way. Mossad is responsible. And somehow Noam Chomsky is like hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. And by the way, when the Wall Street Journal asked him, he was like, mind your own business, which was the funniest thing ever. It was like, I don't want to talk to you about this.
Yeah, so, and it is, I'm right, it is a story about the grotesqueness of money and power. And
correct.
Michael Wolff has written great stuff about this,
yes.
And like knows enough about that world to tell it well. But there's the sort of connect the dots Twitter X, conspiracizing that just doesn't, that is doesn't have evidence behind it, as you know.
No, I mean, it's the basic question you ask people, and it's so funny. I can't believe I'm positively quoting Dan Bongino. I just can't even say his name without. Dan Bongino said, hey, if you have evidence, can you bring it to us? Because there is no evidence. We don't have any evidence. Yeah. But so if you have that, provide it for us and we'll investigate it, which seems, I can't believe I'm giving some credit for saying the most boring, normal thing that you say as an investigator. But what is this evidence that we should be paying attention to that we're not, number one? And it's really crazy that there are people who are supposedly serious people who end up on the Mossad thing. They end up, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Robert Maxwell, the newspaper baron. And, he was misled. Even that, by the way, is very questionable. But he died in what, in the early 90s? I mean, what is, I don't understand.
Mysteriously.
Yes, on his boat. He was pushed over by Israeli intelligence or something.
And, and Epstein was close to Ehud Barak, who was hanging around his mansion a lot. I'm sure he obviously was this kind of fascinating, strange, dark character who talked to everybody.
Yeah.
But there is the idea, and I think this is something that, the idea that this scale of a conspiracy could be concealed by the buffoons who we cover every day really seems sort of boggles the imagination. I think a lot of these stories require a scale of cover-up from people who have been unable to cover up much more trivial things.
Yeah, I mean, this undermines the whole purpose of being a conservative, I imagine, is that conservatives understand that the government can't do anything well. And all of a sudden now they're absolute geniuses and they can wire up Building 7 and blow it up, and they can do, I mean, I said this the other day when I was on a show with my friend Ethan Strauss, who's also here on this network on Two-Way. And, as I said to him, logic, just use basic logic. If basic logic says, how do you get 25 people into, Building 7 to wire it up and then have someone somewhere else blow it up and no one tells anyone, no one sees anyone, logic would suggest, Occam's razor here is that maybe it just was because a couple planes hit the buildings next to it. This kind of stuff in this story is so obvious to me, is that, as you said, if there's all this stuff that he has in his back pocket, the entire purpose is filming of people and blackmailing, why the hell didn't he use it at any point, the second arrest? Why did he use it? Well, he got off the first time. It's like, well, yeah, his lawyer was Alan Dershowitz. And he went to the Justice Department, and that's what Alan Dershowitz does. He gets OJ off. He gets Klaus von Bülow off. This is what they do. It's called being rich. This is the controversy here.
That is a conspiracy, by the way.
Of course. But it's not the conspiracy people think it is. The conspiracy is rich, powerful people spend, a lot of energy meeting this is what Jeffrey Epstein knew all these people, so they can ask favors of them later.
There's something in the DNA of populism of this moment to accuse people of sex trafficking, specifically.
Correct. Yeah.
It seems like every fantastic conspiracy points there. Sometimes then from there to the Jews.
Yeah.
But there's some kind of deep structure of the way people feel right now that evenally gets you to
How
the
do you think we got there,
trafficking children.
Why is this the kind of blood libel of the moment? Children. I mean, that's what QAnon was about, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these other things. I mean, in the UK, there was this scandal which turned out to be bullshit of a guy that was saying, and the second you hear it, I'm like, am I the only one that knows that this is a lie? Where, these members of parliament are having these seances on, they always have like a stone tab, like, who is delivering this thing to their house? We have a big stone block.
But doesn't it feel like it just comes from some ancestral lizard brain thing?
Yes, and some Russ Meyer movie that they saw or something, but the combination of
one of the
these
two.
Things. But I don't understand the children thing. Where does the children thing come from? Why is that important?
I mean, I think it's just people's deepest anxieties about power, and but it is, right. But it's so totally. I mean, and by the way, Epstein really abused these young women. That's
of course,
totally
that's not a conspiracy. That is true, 100%. Yeah, you've covered media a long time. You covered media for 2 or 3 years for the New York Times.
Yeah, me too.
Obviously, you were the editor-in-chief of Buzzfeed News when it was in its heyday and very powerful. People come to you. I mean, you're going to people to report media stories. I mean, you do Mixed Signals, by the way, the media podcast you do with Max Tani. Very, very good show. And Max is a great media reporter, by the way. He's really turned into one of my favorites. What is the thing that you see in all of that time in these kind of corridors of power that kind of disgusts you the most? I'm sure people are trying to get things.
God, I have such a high threshold for disgust. I'm not even sure I'm not sure it's a feeling.
What would
I'm
other
subject
people
to.
be disgusted by? You wouldn't be.
I mean, I think that something that people don't realize, although I'm not sure it's disgusting and I don't think it's new, is the extent to which everything every public figure does is about how they will appear in the media. how fully reactive to social media and to television this administration, but really every administration is. How kind of the extent to which American foreign policy kind of revolves around what's in the headlines. I was in Hong Kong recently. Like, remember Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you're the only one, because it like dropped out of the headlines and then totally out of the U.S. agenda, which is now focused on Taiwan. But the extent to which the media is just totally intertwined with politics and not separate at all from it is something that I think I've really kind of sometimes really.
So it's not necessarily holding a mirror to things that are happening. It's actively creating these things in some ways, even if it's not deliberate.
Right, and I think the question of should journalists keep that in their head, or is it kind of corrupting to think about that all the time? Is a hard question, actually. But Andrew Cuomo has this thing he says. Remember that guy? That I've always liked, and which he totally failed to kind of deliver on. But which is that when he was coming up in politics, all he and his dad Mario thought about was who's on the other side of the net. Mm-hmm. And if you were going to be like serving up some policy or some political announcement, you'd be thinking like, how's Jimmy Breslin going to play it?
Yeah.
And that he now feels, which I think is part of his problem, that now there's nobody on the other side of the net.
Yeah.
I think it's actually, he just doesn't understand who's on the other side of the net. But there is this way in which, I think that's right. But I think there's this way in which people in public life who are good at it are like constantly thinking about how anything they do is played back to them. And Trump, maybe in the most extreme case, is just sort of like staring into the mirror all day.
I mean, journalists think about this all the time. Who are those people in the net on the other side or playing the net now who are not Jimmy Breslin, who are not, the old kind of tabloid, all these kind of outer boroughs, papers, Newsday, and they had people you would know in these things. Steve Dunleavy, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I used to go to a bar in Midtown, by the way, that the screensaver on the touchscreen where they checked it was a bouncing head of Steve Dunleavy.
Is it Langan's?
Yes, he used to drink there so much. And then he got kicked out of that place. But those people are kind of gone. So I noticed this in media, and maybe you disagree with this, is people always trying to scare those new people up. An example, before we started, I mentioned my friend Andrew Schultz, who's a comedian. He sells out Madison Square Garden. There was a piece on him in the New York Times in which the lead was, he's the new political gatekeeper. He has had Trump on, he had Bernie Sanders on. We're always looking for those people because there doesn't seem to be the ones that we have of the past, right? The Jimmy Breslins of the world. Is it true that all these new people in social media, whether they're comedians, the Dave Smith guy or the, Jimmy Dore, all these people that have big followings, but do they actually matter? Is it big followings for, we're a nation of 330, 40 million people. Does it actually matter? Because we seem to be trying to find these people who are, the one guy that you have to convince. And that's, now it's the comedians. Look who Donald Trump talked to during the campaign. Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you make of this new kind of universe?
I think it's real. It's very powerful. And in a way, and I think it's actually very quickly moving, I think, from a place where you have everybody's got a YouTube show. And Trump, Trump is doing the classic YouTube thing. If he's bringing a lot of attention to them too. A lot of people who hadn't watched Theo Von learned about Theo Von from Donald Trump, as well as vice versa.
Correct,
it's a classic kind of two-way street. But I think we're right now in sort of the peak of this fragmentation where there are all these sort of disaggregated voices. And I don't know if you saw, but Fox just bought another podcast recently, a conservative podcast called Ruthless. And Fox bought the production company that hosts your friend our mutual friend Megyn Kelly.
They bought Ruthless.
And they've also bought Red Seed Ventures, which
oh, that's right.
Which produces, doesn't own, but produces Megyn Kelly, Piers Morgan, Tucker Carlson. And I think we're actually in this moment when a lot of you have this sort of absolute feeling that there are all these independent voices and they don't work for anybody. And I think what we're about to see is it's all sort of becoming television again, and they're going to kind of reconsolidate into networks and into, Sky dances and talks to buy our mutual friend Barry Weiss's.
Correct. Yeah.
Outfit.
No, and I'm very happy for them, and
But I think we're heading into this era of consolidation again, actually, where it is going to look a little more like, you're the Jimmy Breslin of the whatever thing you're part of.
But are you talking about me? So whatever this whole thing is.
It's so confusing. I mean, things we have, two-way. It's great. We haven't got our heads. Nobody's got their heads around it.
There's a bug on the screen. You can see it's two-way.
Yeah.
We all are tempted by that money. I mean, if somebody's asking me, hey, does Rupert Murdoch wants to pay X, I would say yes.
By the way, this is expensive. Like it used to be like, when you were first doing this, you were in some like weird closet, and now there's like lights and people.
Yeah, the lights. I mean, we're in the back of Lowe's. I mean, there's like, a loading dock right there.
4 like skilled professionals here.
Yeah. Oh no, these guys we just got on Craigslist. That guy's been drinking all morning. Oh, God, we tried to get him out, but might as well put him to work. But no, I mean, if someone comes, I mean, you mentioned this Ruthless podcast. I know them because, the podcast that I do outside of this, the Fifth Column, we go on Megyn Kelly's show like once a month, and she's very generous to us, despite the fact that we disagree on a lot. And there's another similar one, which is Ruthless. And those guys I know from that show. And I'm just jealous at this point that I want someone to come, and buy us up. But the thing about it is, why does everyone love Joe Rogan? Why does everyone love Andrew Schultz? And I don't have a single bad thing to say about Andrew. I think he's fantastic at what he does. But it's because they feel independent in the sense that Andrew had Trump on and said, I like this guy. And then he said, he betrayed me. And he betrayed all of us who didn't want foreign wars. We didn't want more spending. And then he has Bernie Sanders on. Next episode, he says, I think the real America First party is the Democratic Socialists. In that kind of whiplash to people who are professionals, been doing this for a long time, we're like, wait, what? How did that happen? The average person sees that as a level of honesty that you don't get in the media.
But do you think his average viewer wants to hear that much about politics?
I don't know.
I think that's a big question.
I don't know. I think that what we're seeing is, and you wrote about this, and you got me in trouble when you wrote about this, about the change in the kind of, anti-woke media landscape. A lot of the people that came to that show, these were comedians that didn't give a shit about wokeness, and they would transgress that stuff every time they went on stage.
But then they were inherently did not like speech, the idea that they should walk on eggshells.
Correct. And that brought people in, and then there was something about that moment and that cultural moment in America where that became political. Everything about it became political. Then you were on Donald Trump's side of the aisle, or mostly Donald Trump's side of the aisle. I mean, Theo Von having him on, which I thought was fantastic.
Oh, that was like the best. That was the best Trump appearance I've ever seen.
Particularly because he started asking questions.
Yes, it's the only time I've ever seen Trump like really interested in somebody else.
Right? It's exactly right. I saw him do this, and he said, "So the cocaine, what is this? Makes you crazy, right?" And I was like, "Oh, he looks like he's truly interested in answering this question about cocaine." And I was like, "Oh, there's an enormous amount of value in shows like this, even if the host doesn't really know that much about politics."
Yeah, and I think, but I think that if you squint your eyes, what you see is just television, right? Like I think the most talented people from this YouTube era. I mean, Rogan is a great interviewer. Like he's just good at drawing people out. A lot of the comedians you mentioned are like really successful, good comedians. And I then think you're seeing what you're all seeing though is just very, very experienced television broadcasters. Megyn Kelly, who was the star of Fox, Tucker Carlson, who was the star of Fox, Piers Morgan, who is an unbelievably gifted broadcaster. Starting just to like land with like both feet in this kind of digital ecosystem and like kind of clear a path. There's this incredible clip of Rogan and Dave Smith saying, "Hey, have you seen what Piers Morgan is doing? It's crazy." Because Morgan has, if you watch, I'm a little obsessed with this. If you watch Piers Morgan's show, what you see is that him just demolishing amateurs. And you see like a professional and amateurs, and it reminds me of the early days of the blogosphere that we were both in.
Well, it's exactly the same. I mean, first of all, the Piers Morgan thing is exactly right. It's every episode is the first person Mike Tyson fought out of prison. The chump fight, like the guy that comes out and he's kind of fat, and Mike Tyson's like, "All right, well, I'm good. I just knocked this guy out." It's like children that come on and he beats them up. I mean, Tucker Carlson used to do that on the Fox show. Now he doesn't have anyone adversarial on at all, which is a very interesting turn because that was the whole thing, the punch up.
Yes, only his friends. Like the president of Iran.
Only his friends like the president of Iran and various people who are a little too concerned about the Jews. But the blogosphere thing is interesting because I used to point this out in the day was, you were a part of this early days of that too. We all have a Gutenberg press now. This is like amazing. And at the end of it, who are the big people? Andrew Sullivan, who in the early 1990s was the youngest editor of the New Republic. I mean, contributing writer at that point to the New York Times Magazine.
Tina Brown.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it shakes out in all the same ways,
Yeah, and I think what you have is, and I mean amateur in a really positive way. Like people who love what they do and who aren't getting paid, and then the kind of quote unquote professionals arrive, and some of those professionals actually aren't that good. But some of them have real skills, and then everybody starts getting paid. and it professionalizes, and the people who are best at it mostly win. And a lot of the amateurs either really would like to stay amateur or get out competed. And I think you're starting to see stuff that people like seen as a feature of YouTube, like, it's really shaggy, it's really unprofessional, the lighting isn't good, that's all part of what I love, get really pushed to the side for, this sort of beautiful production that you have here.
Yeah, I mean, we're all trying to make television at the end of the day, and there's a reason we are. And I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think there is a form of meritocracy. I don't think that's all. I mean, some of these people, in media, they all go to Yale and to Harvard, and they have powerful parents and everything. But there's some of us who don't and who didn't.
Yeah.
My dad was in the union. My mom was a secretary, and I went to UMass, and I worked my ass off. And I think it's great. You can actually get there. But I do give credit to people who, one person we mentioned twice who really despises me, that guy Dave Smith. I shouldn't even say that guy. That's condescending. I shouldn't say that guy. He's a comedian, and everyone says, I've never seen him do comedy. It's like, well, who cares? Because he's good at this. I disagree with him on literally everything he says, but I would never say he isn't talented. So these people can actually rise in this environment, and he's on Piers Morgan all the time. And, Piers Morgan figured this out because he was on Talk TV. They had this, this thing. And then he said, no, I should just do it on the internet. I don't need you. Yeah. And everyone figuring out they don't need people. Is that a bad thing, this fragmentation? Because on Mixed Signals on your show, you've had, in the past couple of months, and I listen regularly, a lot of people who are just individuals. This doctor from
Mike.
Yeah, Dr. Mike from YouTube. And there was a couple others that you had recently. They're just individuals that do well. Cleo Abraham, who I met when she was, just out of college, and I think was applying for a job at Vice, and we had a mutual friend. I mean, and I didn't even know she was big. I look at her stuff, and she's incredibly talented. This, though, can it last? I mean, the sense that, it's like we wanted to not pay the cable bill, and now we pay more for cable because we have so many subscriptions. People say this to us all the time. I want to subscribe to the Fifth Column, but I gotta do month on, month off with things that I like. It's a lot.
I think it can't last. I think it's too annoying.
It's too annoying.
And like I subscribe to so many Substacks and so many, and I this is it. Like
you had Hamish on recently, yeah.
And a lot of people are my friends, by the way. So of course I'm going to subscribe. Yeah. But the notion that even my favorite Substack, it costs me the same as the Wall Street Journal. Yes. Does not make any sense, which is a number of Substacks all combined together.
Yes.
Doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, look, what are we going to do in the end? We're going to make a magazine.
Yeah, and I think that it's unsustainable because it's annoying. Same with streaming services, and you do see consolidation, or as these kind of studios buy each other and merge. Yeah. I just think that the pressure from consumers to clean it up is really strong, and you start to see it in weird places. Like if you sign up for a Verizon, a Verizon phone. If you go purchase a Verizon phone, they will offer you a Netflix Max subscription, where they have just unilaterally bundled Netflix and HBO together. Really? Which I guess they've gotten Netflix and HBO to agree to because subscriptions are so valuable. But you just it's interesting. You're starting to see the consumer pressure just to there's too much of this stuff. We gotta simplify it. And I assume at some point you'll get a Substack all you can eat thing.
That's an underappreciated thing in a way, because it is actually true that I use T-Mobile for my phone, and the reason I do is because every year I get MLB.TV. It's $125.
Yeah,
and I get it for free, and I also get Hulu or all this stuff. It's like, why is my phone?
Yeah.
Why am I getting all this media through my phone? It's like, well, I guess I watch some of it on my phone. My daughter does.
But the answer is because they're really good at getting you to renew.
Correct.
Nobody ever cancels their phone subscription.
Correct.
And whereas everybody's month to month canceling their Netflix subscription, and so the streamers are starting to say to the phone companies hey, can you help us renew? And ultimately, it's a business story. It's true. That's also why the Piers Morgans of the world are now on YouTube, because they can get paid more.
You had Hamish Mackenzie, who I consider a pal. I think he's a brilliant and interesting guy. He's one of the two founders, along with Chris Best, of Substack. Someone asked me the other day, I think it was in this office, which I was surprised at, said, well, I don't know, it was, what is Substack? I don't understand this whole Substack thing. And I just said, it's like anything else. You can write and record and put stuff up, but they just process payments for you. That's basically, it's a payment processor in a lot of ways. But people talk about this Substack revolution, and I think there is something really revolutionary about it. I mean, the number of people that have, every time somebody flames out somewhere, whether it's because of a scandal or because they just quit or because they have an issue with their boss, they start a Substack. I can't believe these things are all doing well, but it doesn't take much to make $100,000 a year on Substack, right? It doesn't take that many people who subscribe. And at the end of the day, you're doing something. You started in 2022, Semafor?
Yeah.
It's very traditional, very kind of old school in its way. How do you guys make money?
Well, I guess I think we see ourselves as, in fact, ahead of the curve. But,
okay.
I
just see it as,
but it is a media company.
It's a media company. You hire Dave Weigel, you hire Max Tani, traditional.
I think I'm happy to tell you how we make money, but I think it's sort of interesting to talk about how we recruit journalists, because it is of this moment in that these great reporters, like the people you mentioned, Liz Hoffman, Rita Albergati, are people who, are reporters who break news. And it's actually a little hard if you're not an opinionator, if you're somebody who's just out there getting scoops, it's actually a little hard to build a Substack audience, because you might not tell them what they want on any given week. Like, turns out the good guy might be the bad guy. Sorry.
But Substackers need you to break the news so they can talk about it.
Right. But you also, reporting requires some legal support. Sometimes a brand, you get into big fights with people you kind of want a brand you can sort of hide behind sometimes. And sometimes it's kind of a team sport. But on the other hand, great reporters and audiences do want the kind of directness of the connection to an audience that you get with Substack. And I think we tried to build an environment that's sort of the best of both worlds for the journalists, where they're writing a newsletter that's hitting an audience very, very directly, speaking in their own voice, telling you what they actually think, which you're sort of not allowed to do when you work for the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or the New York Times. But at the same time, with the sort of organizational support of a newsroom.
So a traditional newsroom, but some of those strictures of an old school newsroom, like, you got to play it straight. I mean, they can be a little more opinionated in your world.
Yeah, I just see it as more transparent. I think that everybody knows that every newspaper reporter has an opinion. Right? Certainly the best ones, the really expert ones.
Yeah.
And they have to disguise it by, like, the first quote in the story is the guy you agree with.
Yeah.
And everyone's in on that joke. And so I think we try to sort of provide the best of both worlds in that way. I mean, as for our business, it's like, it is about this sort of directness of connection to particularly kind of like a leadership audience who can't afford to be lied to, who aren't interested in experiencing news as like hyper partisan entertainment, but need to make decisions. And so we do that in advertising and in events in a really big way.
So it's to elites, as they would say these days, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's like a safe word.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a pejorative, because there always has to be elites. So let's just
and if you look, and there are a lot of people for whom news doesn't have to be true.
Yes, a lot of people.
And there's a subset of people who actually do want the news to be true, and that's who we write for.
What is the danger of those people who don't care if the news isn't true? I mean, we hear a lot about this. Fact. Remember that we started with the fact checkers, and we realized that didn't matter.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
That was a big mistake, right? I mean, how does one combat this stuff, or does one even have to? Just like allow these, no matter what you do, the New York Times can keep on saying, Donald Trump said, without evidence. It's like, okay, well, politicians have been saying things without evidence for years. Now it just seems like you're picking on this guy, and his supporters are even more angry at this point.
Yeah, and he knows, and he's in on the joke.
He's in on the joke too.
And he's getting you to wag your finger at him so that to tell his supporters, see, look at these assholes. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's, I guess I just think it's, maybe I'm a little fatalistic, but it feels like a kind of reversion to the norm of history, and that maybe the world where, for very specific technological reasons, like it's really expensive to put up a broadcast tower and there's only so much spectrum. There were three big broadcasters. Big metropolitan newspapers had these huge economies of scale, so there's a handful of those, and so there were these sort of centrist news monopolies or oligopolies that we grew up with and think of as the norm, but were really a pretty weird moment. And now we're back to,
and they made a lot of money too.
Yeah, incredible cash machines of businesses, and now we're back to this historical norm of like hyper partisan news that you can't trust. That's taking up a lot of people's time.
And one of the people who was trying to bring us back to that moment, who I think is a sort of really underappreciated newspaper editor, and someone should do a profile of him, maybe I should do it, is Seth Lipsky. And Seth Lipsky, who started the New York Sun, who, decided he was a newspaper reporter when he was like 15 and, was reporting in Vietnam and stuff. And I thought of this the other day because I came across an image of an old New York Sun cover, and this is 2023, I think, 2003. And I realized how much the world had changed because I saw that it was 25 cents. And I go to buy the Wall Street Journal, it's at like $6 or something for one 25 cents, 20 years ago and change. And that, people gave him a hard time about that, of making a sort of aggressively neoconservative newspaper in New York after 9/11, which, by the way, had a great arts page, had great local coverage. The idea was local coverage. We put New York on page one. That was the whole slogan thing. But I do worry about local news coverage. I know it's a cliche at this point, but I see some people talking about New York politics and they just don't understand it. So on the fifth column, when we need that, we just call Harry Siegel. Yeah. And Harry comes over and he talks and he's like, he sounds like, I don't know if it's Bernie Sanders or Harry Siegel, but there is that kind of loss of the local newspapers, of everybody who really felt like they knew what they were talking about, and it was a great resource. And it kind of bums me up.
Yeah, and you do see certainly in the coverage, in the sort of national freak out about Zoran Mamdani, which God bless, and people. Yeah, he is very left wing, and there's no people.
I'm one of those people.
Are sort of right to freak out about it, but it's very disconnected from the local politics of it. He is not an Islamist. That is sort of like a very, that is like, so you have to be very confused about how New York works to think that.
Yeah.
So people are sort of wandering in from afar, imposing these sort of national hyper-partisan frameworks on our own totally bizarre and kind of local questions.
But that happens in New York. I mean, you've reported on New York for years. I mean, New York is that place where you're kind of allowed to do that because it kind of makes sense to do it, right? As goes New York. I mean, right?
People like to think that, and then it's never true. No New York mayor has ever been elected to office beyond New York mayor, for instance. It is a last stop in everyone's political career, although many have run for other offices.
President Rockefeller, Abe Beame, John Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay, de Blasio, Koch, Dinkins, Giuliani, Bloomberg, this graveyard of presidential dreams.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Because it's partly because it's its own strange ecosystem. I mean, with the demise of this kind of of a really vibrant New York media is sad. And there are lots of efforts here and there to revive it. Your friend Harry and I helped start this thing called the New York Editorial Board, where we interview all the candidates and, publish.
And he does The City, or?
He's a great nonprofit called The City. But it is, there's sort of a lack of center of gravity outside the New York Post, which is, on one hand, an incredible publication that breaks a lot of news. On the other hand, has kind of gave us Eric Adams. Yeah. And now is just doing its best to make him happen again. And I think these situations where the public feels that kind of wealthy elites are trying to force an elderly, damaged, corrupt candidate down your throat, are always we're sort of, that's kind of, I feel like that's getting really familiar. Yeah. And it's really unpleasant.
I for one, support their effort to make the Turkish lobby mayor of New York again. I mean, it's the other option I'm not loving at this point.
Eric has actually, and I think Eric has reason to run on his record.
Really?
Promises made, promises kept, right? There was all that. I mean, nobody told him not to take free airline tickets, but he did. But crime is down. The subways are feeling a lot better. His City of Yes zoning stuff was a big success. In a world where he was not universally despised, he would be a strong candidate.
Yeah, I mean, and Cuomo is kind of the undead candidate. We've now discovered that he's coming back and going to run as an independent, right?
It's an incredible situation. But it is really you just literally, because now they just do it on Twitter, billionaires informing you that you have to vote for an old, corrupt person you hate to stop the hopeful young guy from winning. I mean, it's not going to work, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Mamdani says would have to go through Albany, and that's something he doesn't point out. I think he can't just unilaterally do a lot of the things that he's promising. But if it were
seizing the means of production,
turning
that's more an Albany thing.
Yeah, I mean, turning everything below 14th Street into a giant yoga studio, I think was one of his platforms. But I mean, I worry about this stuff. Not in the sense that I think it's going to happen. I do think there'll be a lot of capital flight. I think, a lot of this stuff is mobile. I mean, you can go to Miami. I mean, Bill Ackman's a bad tennis player and full of shit on politics, but he's not necessarily wrong about that. But I mean, that stuff worries me. But I do worry more about this sort of Overton window shifting on the Democratic side. I think I've been, desperate for the Democrats to run somebody who's normal and, like my namesake, like Daniel Patrick Moynihan or something. But that seems, with the Mamdani victory, there's a lot of people that believe that this is the moment for us to push the party toward a more squad direction.
Yeah, I think that if you look at who's won other primaries around the country that aren't New York, that aren't the media capital, that don't talk about ourselves quite as much, you basically see, Abigail Spanberger.
I agree.
What's her name in Jersey? You see sort of like moderate suburban moms who are also fighter pilots. That's
sure.
kind of the
yeah.
Mikey Sherrill. So I think I'm not sure that this means that AOC is going to be the Democratic nominee, but I'm not sure it doesn't either. I mean, just the amount of energy and organizing. Dropsite News had an incredible piece this week on just the depth of organizing in the Democratic Socialists of America, which have like 40,000 members in New York City and are basically the only organized political force in this very apathetic town.
Yeah, no, they're very organized, and they'll be organized when they put you all in prison. To the gulag, the trains will run on time to send you to the gulag in Alberta. What about media now in the Trump years? I mean, we've been scaring ourselves to death, myself included. I mean, particularly, the CBS stuff, which just boggles the mind. I can't believe people are outraged by the fact that Donald Trump sued for what, $10 billion? $1 billion. It was like a Austin Powers moment. He's like, $20 billion for an interview that he was not involved in. And was edited a way that he didn't like, which, by the way, when the transcript came out, was a totally normal way of editing an interview. And CBS buckles on this, sort of.
No, it's I think
that's troubling, don't you think?
Yeah, I think, for all of our careers, there have been people, mostly kind of Naderite lefties, saying like the media is owned by corporations and it's going to wind up doing the bidding of power and it isn't really independent. And honestly, my answer to that for most of my career had been like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
I work in this industry. Like, that's actually not how it works. Like, the owners don't bother us. And that has now been totally vindicated. You see these big conglomerates and you see companies owned by rich guys who have other interests, like the Washington Post and the LA Times. Like, Patrick Soon-Shiong really wants to get drugs approved. He's not going to have this newspaper out there making trouble for the people who approve the drugs and who have just shown that they will use the levers of government to reward their friends and punish their enemies. And so I think you see this huge shift in the corporate media who will, I think, genuinely justify it to themselves by saying, well, I don't disagree with Trump on a lot of stuff, but this is a correction against the woke mind virus. But it does exactly line up with their financial interests. And so that is, it's a real Rubicon that's been crossed there.
I saw a lot of people worrying about the lineup at the inauguration. Right, you have Bezos and Zuckerberg and all the guys. I'm with you, and this stuff I think is scary. But the one thing I responded to in that was that you guys have been seeing this on the other side for years. Come on. It's Trump, and these people are lining up. They're kissing the ring. I never heard that phrase, or I didn't hear it that often when you saw media moguls with Democratic presidents. The man who pushes Biden off the ticket is the guy from Syriana. The Hollywood is kind of entangled. You have, go out to the Hamptons during an election year and, Jeffrey Katzenberg is having a fundraiser for God knows who. And you saw these people there for the Trump thing, and like, they're kissing the ring. It's all over now. I don't think it's that bad. But do you think it will create the backlash that will be good for media in the sense that Bernie Sanders was a result of so many boring and quote unquote corporate Democratic candidates and did exceptionally well. And the DNC was exercised by this and did everything they could to stop it. Is there a media version of that in the sense that if these guys go too far in that direction, there's going to be a backlash of people that do not want anything to do with them?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think like the populism is not like going away. And I think as corporate media decides that it wants to program like primarily for Sherry Redstone, secondarily for other members of its board, there are a lot of other people in the world who are not going to want to watch a version of CBS that is programmed for the most cautious conservative and pro-Trump part of the world.
Yeah.
And so not that a lot of people were watching CBS anyway, but there's obviously going to be a big audience for left-wing and right-wing populism that's not going away. And I think what's the sort of Zoran Mamdani AOC paper of record? There's a lot of space for that.
Yeah, there is. You had a piece in Semafor maybe a couple weeks ago about Steve Bannon going after Fox News. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the evil empire of the Death Star. I mean, C-Band's been on this, by the way, for far longer than anyone's been paying attention. I mean, this is like 2019. I interviewed him, and he was telling me about how much he loved AOC and how Fox was the kind of enemy and everything. No one would have predicted that. I mean, it's funny because you had a guest on the show on the podcast. What's her name with the sunglasses?
Kara Swisher.
Kara Swisher, who said, evil Uncle Rupert or something. I mean, in the landscape, is he the evil guy? The guy now? I mean, no one expected the fact that so many on the right and the people that I'd interviewed at Trump rallies who'd said to me they would never watch Fox News. Only
Fox represents the center right, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Although, and for all the prophecies of old media doom, Fox is crushing it. Fox is incredibly successful right now, and I think successfully pivoting to and absorbing new media in a way that others are not. But there is this big space that Bannon now really has managed to occupy on the right. And he's a big audience, like he's a celebrity now.
How big is his audience?
I don't know numbers.
What's it called? The something.
Steve Bannon's War Room.
The War Room. Yes. Yeah. Out of prison.
And what's kind of interesting that I think it shares with a lot of this space is that it is longer form and it's more intellectual than television, actually. Like, I saw, that comic Adam Friedland?
Yeah, I think you had him on the show.
Yeah, we had him on, and he said something really interesting, which is, he's doing this new show of his on what looks like not just a television set,
like
but a television set.
Yeah.
A Dick Cavett set, a television set from, the 70s, old days when Bill Buckley and Gore Vidal would go at it, which was, by the way, amazing television.
Correct. Yeah, which Buckley almost didn't do. But that whole thing of the '68 convention is that people leaning back in their chairs and
like French television.
Yeah. It's like plumes of smoke and people insulting each other, but doing it in a kind of high-minded way. Yeah. No, Adam Friedland, guys like this. I mean, I can say this because it doesn't matter because we're on the internet, but. He used to host a show called Come Town. It's he gets huge guests on his show. Yeah. I mean, really big guests. And the guy from Come Town but he's incredibly funny. He's amazingly smart, and he's kind of a fearless interviewer. And I have an enormous amount of respect for him. But he's another one in your lineup of people, the Doctor, Adam Friedland, all these people that are just independent actors that are doing fantastic work.
Yeah, but I think we should. My gut is don't get hung up on how independent they are. There's going to be big consolidation, lots of money. These are going to be the big media figures of the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Rogan. Well, that was the thing that I think was when I believed every conservative conspiracy, because Joe Rogan was enormously successful for years.
And has been doing this for years. I think
no one bought him.
The reps that he is. Yeah, that's right.
And finally, Spotify took a flyer on it and then had mass walkouts.
Yeah.
People walked out of that. Let me ask you about that.
I think Neil Young is back. I just sort of noticed that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Neil Young was like, COVID, this is terrible, and now he's...
that was actually back. I was like, what? I can't get... I almost had to leave Spy. I really like Neil Young.
Really? Yeah. I didn't care.
But I didn't have the energy to vote with my feet over it. So
I'll find someone doing a cover of "Rockin' in the Free World" or something. Neil Young, who had a weird Reagan period that everyone forgets about too. Yeah, and he likes to forget about and says it was misreported. But let's end. I want to end on this. The newsrooms themselves. I did a story for the Free Press about my time at Vice, and it was focused on the fact that no one was talking about the content. I mean, everyone was talking about Shane Smith and the money and this and bad investments. And it's like, well, it can sustain itself if it's still doing the content it was doing in 2011. And, I had to do the cliche thing, but was true, was that the newsroom was kind of taken over by very young people with very extreme politics. When people say to me that we're on the other side of quote unquote wokeness, and you recently wrote a piece about the kind of crisis in anti-woke media, it seems to me that is probably true in a lot of places, but not necessarily the universities and in media. Media seems like New York Times still seems like, pretty similar politically to what it was maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago or 5 years ago. But I don't think you're afraid of your own employees. But I think a lot of people
they're
are.
Terrified of me. I'm so afraid of my employees. Oh my God. Yes.
But is that an issue these days that there's been a reaction to that for sure, and people have become successful on it. I mean, even Adam Friedland, like the Cumtown guys were like absolutely un-PC and like, but they're leftists. They're like kind of democratic socialist guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're right. I think like the core dynamic that you nailed is that there was this period when the old people were afraid of the young people in newsrooms. I think like I feel like Gen X, like with which we are members.
Yes,
I felt fairly comfortable straddling that and not being afraid of either group. But
you weren't when you were at Buzzfeed?
No. But we built that, like it was not, I didn't inherit, I didn't sort of somehow like mistakenly hire a bunch of young people.
Yeah.
And we were sort of native to web culture. I also always deliberately hired a bunch of conservatives. I always hired people out of right-wing media because I think.
You made a couple of huge mistakes, but we're not going to talk about that.
You nothing ventured, nothing gained.
It's been fucking patty cake, Ben. I can't not mention Benny Johnson.
I'm not asking you not to mention it. I made some mistakes.
You made some mistakes.
But but certainly there was this cultural moment driven by social media in newsrooms, but also like at PepsiCo. Like across society.
Yeah,
that just sort of washed through these.
But that's the differentiation I try to make.
I think the question of whether, I think it's a really interesting question of like, right. I mean, I think like the New York Times has just obviously made this like deliberate effort to like pull back and to tell people like they're not necessarily like purging people who have left-wing politics, but they're telling people to shut up about their politics.
Yeah.
I do think there's a sort of, I mean, I think it's like the 60s, right? There are people for whom 1969 was like the year zero. And then, 70s, 80s had to go back to their normal corporate lives, but always sort of hung on to like that value set, and others who totally sold it out in the 70s and 80s. And I think there'll be some of both.
Without being specific, I mean, obviously you wouldn't be specific. And, but I know you say that you hired people and made a balanced newsroom at BuzzFeed, but do you recall any experiences in which there were kind of mini revolts that were political in nature?
No, and I guess we just like, I do think because we had just like built this thing together.
Yeah.
Like the fights were like, I thought basically, and I won some and lost some, but they weren't toxic and they weren't hyper ideological. Like, but yeah, we ran, I remember at one point, maybe the most cliched version of it, we ran an op-ed by a guy who ran the gay Republican group.
Yeah, Log Cabin or Go Proud.
Yeah. And maybe it was I can't remember if it was pro-Trump or pre-Trump, but the guys who hosted our morning show, Saeed Jones and Isaac Fitzgerald, did not like that we had run that. So I went to the morning show and we yelled at each other about it a bit. Like that seems.
Yeah, that seems, and that's been in newsrooms for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think like that's,
it was just the nature.
But also like BuzzFeed was writing for young people on the internet who leaned left. And so I think there was, I don't know, it was less, it was.
What is the legacy of BuzzFeed News?
I think we hired so many great reporters who, and I do think like pushed really hard on just doing actual journalism on the internet, and many of them have gone on to do it elsewhere. I mean, we also obviously just made mistakes about what the business would be like that I bear a lot of scars from. Yeah, I mean, but you're an editor. You're not a business guy. I did discover that in the course.
Yeah. Well, you presented yourself as a business guy.
Right. Fantasized maybe. Yeah.
Could it have survived had certain things been done differently, or is it just inevitable that something of this size, in this experimental in its way, would kind of fade out?
I think it could have been smaller and built a business that would have been totally different. But but the notion that you could build to that scale on social media and have economics that financed really great journalism, no, but it didn't.
And go public.
Much less go public.
Yeah, but like a SPAC, and Vice went through the same thing, is that people treating this like it was a tech startup, and it was a place that was in certain aspects was hemorrhaging money.
Right. Yeah. Media isn't tech. I think sort of recognizing that is a little painful for your investors. But.
But do you look back on that time, the BuzzFeed time, as, with pride or with regret mostly? What is the dominant feeling when you think back on it?
Some of both. I mean, I thought we did great work, and I love the people, and people from both very conventional, very unconventional backgrounds. Did a lot of great journalism. I think we're pretty fearless about it. And very proud of that. I mean, obviously, though, like I feel like I should have seen coming sooner that we couldn't afford what we were doing.
Yeah. Well, it's always fun to spend somebody else's money. You don't see it when.
Apologies to Mark Andreessen and our friends at NBC and.
Mark Andreessen was a.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else's money, but yes, they finance a lot of great journalism.
There you go. Okay, let's time-wise. Let's. Look at my watch, like it's a therapy appointment. All right, we're gonna go.
Your next client is here.
We're gonna go to our next client out there in two-way world. Aaron, are you there? Aaron or Aaron? Is it Aaron or Aaron?
It's Aaron, like Hank Aaron.
Oh, Hank Aaron. Okay, yeah.
That's actually what I was named for. No, thank you so much for this. This is a fantastic conversation, and your work at Semafor is really fantastic, and you both do great interviews. I wanted to ask, there doesn't seem to be this appreciation a lot when it comes to these eras that we go through in journalism. This era feels so much like the muckraker yellow press meets sort of the early progressive era, right? I mean, you had sort of the combustion of all the sensationalism. You had the sort of figures, the Ida Turbells and the Upton Sinclairs and the Lincoln Steffens and Jacob Riles and so on. And so it's very strong personality, brand, whether it's journalism or not, stories. But also it seemed to have the same challenges in that building a viable sort of economic model around sensationalism and attention is difficult. And I'm wondering, just because both of you have, great experience the last, few decades of your career, how do you see this sort of era shaking out? Where do you just believe that it's just going to be a recombination of the NBCs, CBSs, just they might have different names, but in the end, we'll be left with, maybe instead of 4 or 5 or 6 or 12, but maybe 15 or 20 large media sort of centers that are all obviously Netflix subscription type models, et cetera, and that they just try to sort of grind out, modern old school journalism, because in the end, the story is still the story. The investigation is still the investigation. If it's real journalism, if it's not, it's just sensationalism, which the economics of sensationalism seems to be zero. Because with social media, everything's out, everything's free. And with AI, everything's free. No one pays for AI. You guys had a great story on nobody buys actually AI as consumers. They just use free versions of it. So I'm just wondering, just how do you see this era sort of shaking out, over the next probably 3-6 years when it comes to, the big players? Do they just suck up all of these interesting kind of, muckrakers meet investigative journalists and then try to make a business out of that? Or do you just think the whole area is just completely fragmented and just breaks apart?
Thank you for the question, Aaron. Ben, what do you think? Where does this go?
Yeah, well, I love the historical analogy. I do think people, it feels kind of insane and unprecedented to live in this moment. And in fact, the previous moment of kind of normal centrist news was the very strange, unprecedented one. So I think, yeah, you're right that we're back to, sort of maybe like reverting to the insane norm. And there's somebody once said that, the media business only does two things: it bundles and it unbundles. And I do think we're at the end of a long run of unbundling, and what we're going to see is this swing back toward, as you said, these consolidated new groups. Some of them are going to be around personalities, like Piers Morgan is building a network, Megyn Kelly is building a network. Some will be existing big media companies like NBC and Fox. I think some of the old ones will survive, some won't. The New York Times has built kind of an incredible bundle. Semafor, I think, in our way, is trying to build a real global network of our own. But I do think that partly because for the consumer reasons we were talking about before, I think for us, it's for individual journalists, the notion that you can just go out and like do your own thing is really fun and interesting and empowering, although a little exhausting. For consumers, it's just unbelievably annoying. Like, is this some other place I have to pay for? And is it Patreon or is it Ghost? Or like, what is happening? Yeah,
no, it's not a corporate power thing. It's best for consumers.
Yeah,
right?
And so I think consumers tend to win.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, and thank you, Aaron, for that. I just want to point out that this is the show in which people call in and they reference Lincoln Steffens.
That's impressive.
He's seen the future and it works. No, it didn't, Lincoln. Sorry. Just, your journalism is questionable now. All right. Bella, do we have one more? Is it one more?
I have a two-way question. Should I talk to the camera? Or
let's talk there.
Okay.
Talk there. We're just right on. We're loose here. It's not a TV show. Bella, how's it going?
It's going. It's hot.
It's hot.
I'm
Okay.
in New York. So you made a comment about the New York Times and the young people. It's always been the same with the young people, but it was the young people at the New York Times that drove out Barry Weiss, which was great for her because she created this mega empire.
Yeah, for sure.
But it really was a personal slacking of her and her core beliefs, I think because of the internet, this is louder and more nefarious now, where young people, have this too loud a voice that editors I seem to be afraid of. Second thing I wanted to ask about was, so the Mamdani thing it makes it interesting because Mamdani's supporters are the millionaires and his people who are against him are the billionaires. So where does money flow from, because sure, the middle class in New York City is not being serviced by anyone. And I agree that Eric Adams actually did. The city is safer. All those permits that, what's his name, who was the mayor before from Brooklyn, who like rammed the city. You couldn't drive or walk down any street without construction that was totally unplanned and unthought out. So those are the two issues. The next thing I want to ask is, Semafor is a global business, but do you make money? Because Americans don't care what happens outside of America.
Well, Bella, those are three questions, comments, but I just want to say the second one, we're now best friends because that was great. And I love the fact that someone crystallized that the millionaires love Mamdani, but the billionaires don't. Ben, pick one of those and do the Semafor one, because we talked about some of the other stuff of it's a global business. Americans don't care about news, global news.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that has, and yes, I love all of those questions too. Also the scaffolding. That's another podcast. One way that I think, we talk actually, a lot of the show has been we've seen all this before. We're reverting to the norm. This is Lincoln Steffens. I think this really is, to me, new, is that the model for global news has been a kind of colonial model where you broadcast out of London or out of New York, where you send, graduates of elite universities in pith helmets out to Africa to tell you what's happening there. I think that is really
it's an Evelyn Waugh novel.
That is really over and has changed.
Yeah,
so we're trying to build we launched in the U.S. and in sub-Saharan Africa, with a team led by African journalists, and have now since launched in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf. And I think we see it as a network where, the Gulf edition is writing for people there and people who are obsessed with that story. The same with the African edition. In Washington, we're writing for people who are obsessed with that story. And these are three different hubs. It's not like we're broadcasting from the center.
But you always have these global ambitions, don't you? Because BuzzFeed I remember BuzzFeed Brazil.
Yeah, BuzzFeed.
You did the same thing then.
I learned at BuzzFeed that there was enormous appetite in these different markets for really ambitious quality journalism. I also learned that I had no idea how to run an international business. I have found a partner who does, which is incredible. But there is, I think there's, enormous appetite for, again, particularly among a sort of leadership audience who are desperate for something that is, fair and sophisticated, and are finding kind of news that is, maybe it's state directed, maybe it's hyper partisan, maybe it's self-censored, but there's lots of just blind spots.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ben Smith. And by the way, thank you. Those are two very good questions. And I appreciate the smart people that listen and watch this show. So thank you guys for joining us. And the same admonition, make sure to like and subscribe. Then you won't miss a single episode of the Moynihan Report. We'll see you next time.